I originally didn't start out wanting to be involved in animal care, rescue, or marine wildlife conservation or anything. I grew up in Birmingham, well away from the coast, but had holidays during the school summer holidays to the southwest of England, and I think that's kind of where the interest came from as a family, actually. And we were lucky enough to actually move to Cornwall, to West Cornwall, in 2001 when I was just finishing GCSEs. So we started getting a bit involved then with British Divers Marine Life Rescue and Cornwall Wildlife Trust Marine Strandings Network, and it's kind of spiraled on from there.
Dan, what has been your proudest moment working with marine life?
Two of the most recent ones that really stick out in memory actually occurred just in the last year. First of those was dealing with the famous or infamous Wally the walrus when he was at the Isles of Scilly, in particularly damaging boats and causing havoc over there. So having never dealt with a walrus before, he was an incredible challenge, but also an incredible privilege to see quite close up, to do assessments and to come up with management plans and work with a really amazing group of people from many different organisations to keep him safe, basically, and look after him until he was ready to move on, which thankfully he did, because we had no idea how long he was going to stay there for. So we were all really pleased when he left. As sad as it was to see him go in some ways, we were also glad to see the back of him too, because he was extremely challenging. The other thing last year that we had, very local to me, just within a couple of miles almost, was the G7 summit. And we worked really closely with, again, another collaborative effort between many organisations and working alongside Devon and Cornwall Police to come up with a marine wildlife disturbance mitigation plan that was hugely successful. And it worked incredibly well. We were able to share codes of conduct with the security teams, and we had barely any issue at all with marine wildlife disturbance related to the G7 activity. And as a result of our efforts, that has gone on to be shared nationally amongst police forces as the standard for any major coastal events now.
How do biologists classify walruses in terms of the British context? Are they seen as a vagrant? Are they seen as critically endangered when they occur here? Are they seen as seasonal?
Walruses are considered vagrant, but we do get walruses turn up in this country every few years, and potentially with climate change we might see more or perhaps less of these animals because of the pressures that are placed upon them because of the effects of climate change and human activity as well. Usually the walruses that turn up in this country are Shetland, as you might expect, as far north as you can get, and the top of Scotland. We get other Arctic species of seal turning up sometimes, so hooded seals and harp seals in particular, but also occasionally bearded seals and ringed seals. And pretty much every year we're getting a handful of these vagrant Arctic seal species turning up on our doorstep. But we also get things from the other direction as well, coming from the tropics, including marine turtle species and increasingly, again due to climate change, warmer water species of cetaceans.
Can you give us a sense, Dan, of what were the challenges or the skills involved with Wally the Walrus? You said that it was challenging in many different ways. Why?
Well, first was just the remoteness of his location. So the Isles of Scilly are a group of 180 islands off the coast of Cornwall, 28 miles off the coast of Cornwall. So it's not the most easily accessible place. So getting there is either by ferry or by plane or helicopter. And then there's the challenges of it being a small island community. There's few resources out there. We have very few volunteers out there who are able to assist directly with the situation on a day-to-day basis. And again, just coming back to, none of us have ever dealt with a walrus that hauls out on boats consistently either. And for whatever reason, Wally, despite having 180 odd islands to choose from, and there's only 5 inhabited by humans, chose the busiest harbour of the largest island with the biggest population to inhabit for his boat climbing activities. So as you can imagine, that didn't go down well with boat owners, and they were quite concerned about their property, and they were suffering losses. So again, there was the dealing with the community side of it, because there was quite a lot of raw feeling about that.
Dan, what's your biggest guilty pleasure at work?
My actual job is quite a unique one in this country. There's nothing really quite that close to it, certainly dealing with marine mammals, at least anyway.
Dan, what is your best marine mammal fact, please?
My most fun fact, marine mammal fact, this is possibly going to sound a little bit weird, is hooded seals, which are an Arctic seal species. The males, when they mature, they're quite unique in they actually develop a sort of a membrane in their nasal cavity that they can inflate out of their nostril, their left nostril. And it's used for two functions, actually. One is for breeding, for both attracting females and warding off other males by wobbling this balloon out of its nostril around, which looks hilarious if you see videos of it. But it's actually also used as basically an acoustic device as well. They use it under the water as well as on land as well. So I find that absolutely fascinating. But if you just look at videos of hooded seals with their nasal sac inflated, you'll see why it looks bizarre. And I think it's hilarious. And they're the only species that do that.
I think I might have one of those as well. Dan, what's the most endangered marine mammal that you've worked with?
So this is another vagrant species. It's the Kemps Ridley turtle. They're found only really in the Gulf of Mexico, down in the tropics. They can't survive in our waters here in the UK. It's too cold for them. But they are incredibly rare. They're classed as critically endangered, and there's, I believe, less than 23,000 in the whole world. And the whole world for them is the Gulf of Mexico, basically. And they breed primarily just on one beach in Mexico as well. So, yeah, but easily the most endangered animal I've ever had the privilege of working with.
Dan, what books or people or meetings have most influenced your thinking?
As a teenager, I would say Steve Irwin. Later in life, of course, it's fallen more in line with other figures like David Attenborough, of course, who makes incredible documentaries, which are so well respected and well received as well. It's also great to see him now championing some of the global issues like climate change and plastic pollution.
Dan, what is your view of marine mammal conservation and rescue as practiced today by both sanctuaries and zoos?
For ourselves here at BDMLR, it's not something that we agree with in keeping cetaceans in captivity due to their mental, social health needs. And so I think in the UK, in a way, we're in a slightly unique position in that we did away with the dolphin area, sort of 30 years ago. But there is this growing voice against the keeping of cetaceans in captivity. When looking at it in rescue situations in this country, there isn't obviously anywhere that we take cetaceans to that are stranded, where we would rehabilitate them. So we're left with the options of releasing them on the beach if they're deemed healthy enough by a vet who's always involved with those incidents, or to put them to sleep to relieve their suffering, as some of the animals that we do come across, of course, are end of life, suffering hugely from disease, from severe injury, so on and so forth as well. So that's what our role is at BDMLR, is to act in the best welfare interest of the animals that we're working with. So it's really important that we get it right. When it comes to seals, of course, there are rehabilitation centres for them. So we work with a number of other organisations where we can take those animals to get care to eventually then be released back out to the wild again.
Dan, how do you see this sector of marine mammal conservation and rescue in both sanctuaries and zoos changing over the next 10 years?
I think starting with the cetacean captivity side again over the next 10 years, I think there will continue to be efforts made towards reducing or closing completely the number of captive dolphins and whales across, not just across Europe, but across the world. In terms of rescue, what's been interesting for us over the last few years is that there are more and more countries and governments contacting us here in the UK at BDMLR to come out to train their teams, and they start their rescue teams with our help. We've been to Kazakhstan a few times. We've been to Gibraltar, Kenya, the Falkland Islands, and well, a number of others over the years. And one of the more recent ones that we've had contact with has actually been Denmark, which is quite an interesting one of itself, because the laws in Denmark are very much that wildlife is left to its own devices. There isn't really rescue and rehabilitation groups for wildlife in Denmark, but that changed in 2018 when a sei whale swam up a fjord and got lost up there, and persisted in there for a good sort of 3 weeks, I think it was, off the top of my head. And there were, you know, a lot of people calling strongly for the authorities to do something to help this animal, which was gradually starving to death as it couldn't find its way out. You know, there was a lot of people within the country who were very motivated to do something, and to a point the authorities actually relented, and ourselves and other organizations in other countries were offering advice to these people on how they could try to herd the animal back out of the fjord to open water and hopefully to a place where it would be able to survive. But unfortunately, as it turned out, the animal died before that could happen. But what that's led on to is permission for a cetacean rescue group to be set up in Denmark for the first time. And we've been invited in to come and train them this year. So because of COVID, it's been delayed, unfortunately, but we are pretty much almost at the point where we're ready to deliver the training and rescue equipment to them. So that's, you know, that's even just within Europe. There's such variation with the legislation and the groups and efforts that are made with wildlife and wildlife rescue. And I think that's going to be one of the bigger changes that I've seen in recent years. That's relatively close to us, I suppose you'd say.
Dan, what career opportunities are there for people wanting to work with marine mammals?
There's a lot of avenues that people can get into this kind of work, but you absolutely don't have to be living at the coast to have a career in working with marine mammals. There are so many volunteer opportunities that you can get started out with lots and lots of different organisations, whether that's doing beach cleans or wildlife surveys. Some of the things that you can do are, you know, online and remote now as well. So another charity I'm involved with is Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust, who do a lot of seal survey work and data collection in the southwest of England. And with all of the photos that are being sent in, they need to be catalogued and processed and put through the ID network as well. So these are all things that can be done on a computer from anywhere in the world, pretty much, and you'll be getting some really valuable experience. And at the same time, alongside that, that's informing conservation efforts as well. So there's also campaigns on things like public disturbance towards wildlife and marine litter, pollution and entanglement, marine mammal bycatch, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things that people can get involved in, even if they're not right there near to where these animals are. So through volunteer experience and making contacts with different organisations and different people, you will start to find career opportunities and jobs, whether that be in the veterinary profession or vet nursing, going down the research route and academia, or doing the practical hands-on conservation stuff as well. So, yeah, the possibilities really are endless, but volunteering is a great way to get into it to start with for an eventual career change. If you've already got a career, you don't have to think because you've already got a career doing something else that you don't have a chance, because you absolutely do.
We've just talked about career opportunities with marine mammals, rescue and conservation. Dan, if you could please, for somebody who wants a career change, or who is finishing formal education, could you suggest a career plan?
You will, I won't lie, you will struggle to find job opportunities. There's a lot of competition for the jobs that are out there because it is a really popular field for people to want to get involved with, which is fantastic. So many people want to get involved, but of course there's only a finite number of jobs that are actually going to be available. And what some of those people have done is actually going to a different career, or even just working to earn money to keep themselves going while they get the volunteer experience and build up their CV that way and build up their network of contacts. And that then puts them in a much better position for applying for jobs when they do come up, and hopefully puts them in a stronger position as a contender. I think on the career side, mentioning that there is a lot of competition for these jobs, there is a lot of volunteer opportunities, but actual paid jobs are few and far between, is to not give up hope, have a lot of patience and keep going. Don't give up, don't think that you'll never get there. Just keep steadily building up your experience, the skill sets as well. So don't just limit yourself to doing one thing, but branch out and try a few different areas of marine conservation, whether that's, as I say, sort of getting involved in the campaign side or the research side, or or just managing people. Sometimes is a really key skill to have, especially now more than ever with social media. That's really important, is being able to speak to people and be good communicators. So work on yourself, develop your professional skills as well, not just your sort of career knowledge, your knowledge of the field and marine mammals, but also your personal skills as well. So keep at it, don't give up.
Dan, that was brilliant. Thank you very much for being on the Practical Animal channel. You've been an inspiration.
Thank you.
Dan Jarvis.